This was very dumb.
Hey everyone, welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave. My name is Bina 007, and we're going to be talking about, well, really the final episode of Rings of Power Season 2, but really the season as a whole. Today I am joined by Matt
Hey, Varley on the forums.
and by Mary.
Hi, it's Mary on Nymeria on the forums.
And the forums of which we speak are the Discord server. So if you'd like to join the conversation, please go to our YouTube channel or the vocpodcast.wordpress.com and you'll see a link to join. So let's start off with, I guess, your lemon cake rating for the final episode in particular and whether it changes your view of the season or the show as a whole. So Mary, let's start with you.
Final episode, I would say maybe 4 out of 5. I think I'm gonna rate this quite generously because I did enjoy the show. I have a lot of things to say about how it's not very good in my opinion, but I do enjoy watching it. So yeah, so 4 out of 5 for that last episode. Really great scenes. Sauron is a really great character. I think that's one of the main things from this season for me. Is that he really grew into a kind of plausible character, which wasn't that easy from where we started. And the idea we had of Sauron. So yeah, he was great. The acting for all of that was really okay, and some great scenes in all of this episode. So a good one to finish on.
For sure. Matt, how about you? You expressed nerd rage the last time we all got together for a Rings of Power episode. Has that abated with episode 8?
It has not. It doesn't make any fucking sense. I'll give it a 2 out of 5. Just going back over my thoughts, it just seems like they have too many storylines going at once, and they try to touch on all of them. Like none of the Numenorian shit made sense. The Klingon stuff, it didn't make sense. Like they're all of a sudden in Peлагir, and the dwarves, instead of their king just died to a Balrog, they somehow get within Eregion to save the day. Arondir gets stabbed by, I think it was Adar last episode, and we thought he was dead, but he's perfectly fine. And in like the Council of the High Elves, for some reason, he just makes himself a power. Adar gets, the Sauron treatment at the end there and gets stabbed a bunch of times and dies, but Galadriel takes hundreds of foot, dive off of a mountain and is okay. It's just so they just could have done it so much better, and it was just very frustrating to watch at times. It didn't make sense that the orcs would capture Gil-galad and not bring him to Sauron. Like I don't know what the purpose of the book burning was. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. Visually, it was very beautiful, of course, but other than that, it just all the lead up for the stranger. It just the dark wizard, like nothing was resolved. Anyway, so yeah, 2 out of 5. Nerd rage continues.
Oh, I had such high hopes when I watched this episode. I was like, oh, Matt's going to at least love. There are some amazing scenes, and this is going to pacify him, but no. So, for my part, and to explain to listeners once again that I love Lord of the Rings, love the book. I'm not a lore master, so I have watched these episodes very much on their own terms, and I loved episode 8. I was on such a high after it that I watched the whole Lord of the Rings extended edition. I love the visuals. I thought it was one of the most badass cold opens in TV. Like to have the way that Durin goes out with Balrog, I think was so beautifully framed. I agree with everything you say, Matt. Like all your criticisms, I can't really disagree with them. Like I mean, you're completely correct. Logistically, a lot of it doesn't make sense. And Numenor for me is definitely the weakest locale. But I felt that all these narrative threads it was juggling, it actually brought together really nicely in episode 8. And it just really contrasted for me the feeling that I had at the end of House of the Dragon season 2, where I felt nothing had been resolved. I hadn't been given my big battle. Whereas I felt with her, I'd had my beautiful character culminations. So the culmination of the Durin storyline, the culmination of Sauron versus Celebrimbor, which was so beautifully and deeply done. The fact that we get to the point now where Eregion's gone, but we're going to establish Rivendell. We get to the point where the stranger has discovered himself as Grand Elf or Gandalf. I felt that, I mean, I know we don't get named that it's Saruman, but it probably is, not Palando, let's be honest. So I felt like actually it had juggled all these storylines, and, with the exception of Numenor and Isildur, that I don't really care too much about at the moment, it kind of got me there. I felt like real narrative satisfaction. So I guess we're at the opposite ends of the spectrum, with Mary sensibly being in the middle, as the path of truth and reason on this Vogue episode. How would you guys like to do it? Would you prefer to go scene by scene through this episode, or just talk about the different storylines in general over the season and how we thought they played out? Any preference?
For me, I'd prefer to go scene by scene because it would add a little more structure to my hatred.
That's
Mary?
fine with me. Yeah, we can go
Okay,
scene
fine.
by scene.
Heaven forfend we have unstructured hatred on this podcast. There's too much of that in the real world. Okay, so the episode opens with the confrontation between Durin and, I guess, other Durin. And basically, it starts off with the king, who has trusted in the power of the ring all season that he's wearing, breaking through into this massive cavern filled with mithril and just feeling full of greed and self-satisfaction, but then realizing that there's a Balrog, at which point he realizes his error and decides to effectively redeem himself, I guess, by telling his son and daughter-in-law and all of the other dwarves to get out of there while he takes on the Balrog. And we see him sort of leap heroically with his axe. And it's just this amazing visual that I think opens the episode. And I loved it, actually, because I just thought it just really was everything that I love about Tolkien. So people making mistakes, but then redeeming themselves, and heroism against all the worst odds. Like, it's kind of like the fourth Frodo scene, right? Like, he's going to sacrifice himself, but it's ultimately the right thing to do, and shows him kind of, I don't know, seeing a reconciliation with his son in that final moment. And I think that's really beautiful. Thoughts, Mary?
Um, a bit too easy. Like the scene is amazing, but well, first of all, a dwarf isn't going to do much against the Balrog. So what happens then? Does the Balrog just stop attacking and just goes back to its cave because it's had a dwarf for dinner? Unclear for me. So I love the interactions between the two Durins. Yeah, same as you. It's good to be finally out of this he's controlled by the ring thing, and has some see Aldring having some agency in the story. But yeah, not quite enough to redeem the whole. It doesn't really make sense for me that the dwarves at this point in history would be unleashing the Balrog, but still mine for. I mean, they won't be out of Moria just yet, and I guess it's not just about the law or what should be or shouldn't be. It's just about continuity with what we've seen and heard in the Lord of the Rings. So yeah, so that's my main issue with it. Like, he just had to mine for a couple of days on his own to get to this huge cave where the Balrog is, which is like the whole no, we need to stop mining because there's something down there. It's not really plausible for me that the dwarves would be so close already. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my main
I
thing.
agree with that. I mean, I remember sort of the other day or the other episode saying, how is it that Disa loses like a round rock, and then, oh, just round the corner from the market, it's a scary cavern that
Yeah,
no one noticed right next to the market.
yeah, exactly.
I think the point about whether Durin needs to actually kill the Balrog, I don't think he has to kill the Balrog, because he's not going to kill the Balrog, right? I think because even Gandalf doesn't, right?
No,
Gandalf
yeah.
gets bested by the Balrog. I think it's more that by throwing himself at the Balrog and then causing that rock fall, he basically caves in the Balrog and separates him from the rest of the dwarfs. So my interpretation was not that he killed the Balrog or did any harm to him whatsoever, but that just thankfully there was the rock fall and then he separated out, I guess. Matt, nerd rage number one of many, I'm sure.
So I think, to be fair, this is probably some of the best dialogue in the episode besides Sauron's and Celebrimbor's exchanges. I did appreciate, like, no, I didn't let you win. That was you getting stronger. That's kind of sweet. But again, like Marie says, like, we know that they delved too greedily and too deep and awoke an ancient evil. Well, that already happened. Like they're gonna dig for mithril on top of the Balrog now. Like, it just doesn't make sense. The Balrog's not supposed to awake until the third age anyway. Okay, so that was like pretty badass kind of stuff, but it just it doesn't make sense. And like I said, and then immediately afterwards, instead of mourning a king or trying to find him or doing whatever, they're just like, oh well, let's go help the elves. Like, it doesn't make sense.
See, I agree. It doesn't make sense, but it looks so cool. It felt so right.
I mean, it's the issue with most of this series anyway. It's the fact that it's so long before the Lord of the Rings, but they want to tie in to some things that we see there because that's what we know of the universe, and they don't have the rights to anything too detaily in the Silmarillion anyway. So they want us to see a Balrog in Moria because we know there's a Balrog in Moria, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how that could really have made it any different, but as it stands, I can't help but be a bit like, that doesn't really work. But yeah.
But world's greatest desktop wallpaper
Yeah,
during flying at the Balrog.
I brought it up in our last podcast where it's like this like Star Wars prequel sequel thing where we have to see something from the original trilogy to like ground us into this world or something, and we just don't need that.
Yeah, there's a lot of it's kind of amazing actually once you watch Lord of the Rings in close proximity with this, how much it really has been made to sort of dovetail into that IP. And by the IP, I mean the movie, not the original books. Like it really has to sort of, it's kind of,
I mean, they parrot dialogue, like they almost do shot for shot retakes. Like when we see Narsil and Duril, like it's the same thing that Peter Jackson did in his movies, just being.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I agree. So it should
I'm sorry,
be enough.
my daughter just popped in wearing a white wig.
Good for her. She has style.
Oh my God.
Love it. But then again, maybe Peter Jackson, maybe they're thinking, well, when he did The Hobbit, which was in a very different style because it was all CGI, people didn't like it as much, right? Those films haven't been taken to the bosom of the public's heart in the same way as the original Lord of the Rings. So maybe they felt they would be on safer ground by really trying to like mega echo Lord of the Rings. They've obviously overdone it, but I can see why.
I think it works. It's a bit much, and yeah, they've overdone it a bit. But I personally love how the music feels similar. Like I was thinking. So I watched that last episode last night, and I was thinking, well, that music is now kind of in the same place in my brain than the rest of the Lord of the Rings music, and I'm not even sure that the Hobbit's music is. I mean, I guess it is because it was very good because it was still the same composer, but
Howard Shore.
But yeah. Which it isn't on the series, but the music is still very resonant with that same kind of use in the brass section, in the choirs. It's all very similar, and I love that. It anchors me in this world in a very satisfying way. So I don't think that's an issue. I think that's great. But with that in mind, the story itself is not very. It's not. It's not very well written most of the time. So
I agree about the music
because I think like Numenor isn't well written, and yet Sauron Celebrimbor is well written. It's more that it lurches from one to the other. But the music is good. And I also like the sort of the hair and the costumes and a lot of that kind of the architectural rules that were set up in Lord of the Rings are still here. And so it's kind of amazing, like even watching Lord of the Rings yesterday and seeing them like sail through past the Argonath and just seeing like this kind of callback to what's now very ancient Numenor. But then if you look at the clothes and the sort of the armor that Elendil and all those guys are wearing, it's there. It just makes such beautiful richness, I feel, to this world, which I appreciate.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
think that's a function of it just being such a beloved set of books because, I mean, most of it are ripoffs of Howard Nasmith's drawings and paintings depicting this world, and they had just beautiful influences to be able to work on. So
Yeah.
yeah, visually, I mean, visually, this is probably one of the best looking TV shows on the TV, right? But that
Yeah.
doesn't make it good TV.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess it depends how much that carries weight with you. Okay, so after that cold open and the opening credit sequence, we have the stranger who finally meets up with the Dark Wizard, and the Dark Wizard calls him old friend and says there's 5 if they're kind. So we therefore figure out that the Dark Wizard must be Saruman, Radagast, or Alatar, or Palando. And I think we all know, given that this is so rooted in Lord of the Rings, which way it's going, but it's not actually confirmed. Dark Wizard reveals he doesn't actually like to be called the Dark Wizard, saying that it's a sort of ignorant name given by ignorant man. And the stranger basically is not going to stay with the Dark Wizard, especially when Poppy and Nori are in danger. And he says, when your senses have returned, I'll be waiting. So basically, at this point, Gandalf, I mean, his character arc this season is to discover who he is and the meaning of being a wizard, which is that, when you've discovered the true values, which is to hew to friendship and not power, the wand will find you, or the staff will find you, and you'll know your name and you'll know your purpose. A little bit like Nori also has this danger where she also has to find it. I now know my purpose and where my journey is as well. What do you feel about this particular encounter?
This was very dumb. If they think they're setting him up to be Sauron, it's explicitly said that Sauron becomes corrupted because he starts studying the making of rings of power too closely.
Yeah.
That he was still not corrupted, or was maybe getting that way towards the White Council that took place in The Hobbit, but not yet like wholly on to Sauron's side. So that would just mean Gandalf forgot everything.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
Um,
Yeah, this
yeah,
is
I
what.
hate it.
the Valar sent the Astari over to, stop the influence of Sauron. But first, existential side quest, like what the fuck is that? It just, and then Tom Bombadil is the wizard trainer, and that doesn't make any fucking sense. Although I'll say that Rory and the way that they wrote Tom Bombadil made him into a character that, in the books he's insane, right? Like, you would never be able to think that character could be portrayed, on TV, but they did it really well for him. But I just didn't like his role as this like wizard, like, shaman or whatever, like helping them find their way through. Very dumb.
Yeah, and that goes to show, doesn't it, that we'll forgive changes. Because in the Lord of the Rings, as far as I can tell, Tom Bombadil would not give 2 shits about what's going on. He's in his own little world. Like, he would never intervene to train up a Gandalf. But because it's so well done, and because it sort of, makes understandable a character that's so kind of surreal in a way, I think most people have actually really enjoyed this depiction of Tom Bombadil. Whereas I agree with you, even as much as I love this episode, the Saruman thing, I was like, it makes no sense to me. Saruman is kind of like a sort of a different version of the Denethor story, where because he is basically good for most of the thousands of the years, and then he falls into despair because he's got the Palantir and he sees what Sauron is doing and decides he can't be defeated, and that's when he becomes corrupted. So that's a long way in the future. But Mary, is this your peak nerd rage for the episode?
Um, I think so, yeah, probably. Yeah, no, it just makes no sense that he'd be Saruman, and what, the guy just goes from being good to bad and then good again and then bad again for the whole of this existence, and Gandalf is still really shocked that he's evil. No, I mean that doesn't work. I hope they're gonna, I don't know, backtrack from this, but I don't think they will. And also the whole, oh, we don't know who this character is, but maybe he's someone we already know. is getting a little bit old after 2 seasons.
Yeah, they should have just resolved this when they resolved Gandalf for sure. I agree. But it's more just like, because even at the start of Fellowship of the Rings, which I watched yesterday afternoon, Gandalf is still in hope that he's going to go and consult with Saruman. He still thinks Saruman's an ally who's going to be a help. And it's the shock when he gets to his tower and realizes that no, he's going to be betrayed. I mean, like, so yeah. For people who seem to be very, very concerned with keeping Lord of the Rings as their lodestar, this is a little bit weird, for sure. Unless they do something, maybe they'll do something that's weird and twisty, and we'll all be eating our hats. But we shall see.
Well, I think it's kind of implied in the books that there are other powers because they call Sauron's version Dol Guldur the Necromancer without knowing it's Sauron. So like that leads me to believe that there can be other powers and other people with quote magic ability.
Oh, okay.
So it could be a non-Istari dark wizard. I mean, even the mouth of Sauron is a black Numenorian who must be thousands of years old, right? So there are other kind of powers that I believe exist
Okay,
and
so
that can
maybe
be
it's
tapped
not
into.
Saruman. But then he said he was one of the five, or five were sent, of which. So doesn't that mean he has to be?
Maybe that's just a lie.
That's
He's a
true.
bad
Yeah.
person. He could lie.
Bad people lie. Good point, Mary. Well said. Okay, so for now, let's give maybe the writers the benefit of the doubt because
Yeah.
they do seem to really like Lord of the Rings. So the idea that they would so like dumbly or stupidly overturn it seems a bit weird.
Hey, one quick question. What happened to those three acolyte chicks?
Huh?
Oh, remember the first season when they're like, "Oh, that we think Gandalf's Sauron. Oh no, he's not Sauron. Oh, let's take him to the Dark Wizard." And then,
Oh yeah, they just
oh yeah,
disappeared, didn't they?
yeah, fucked right
Narrative,
off, didn't they?
narrative threads. Yeah, who knows?
But again, those they had some kind of power, and they
Maybe they're
weren't.
still wandering around somewhere.
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows?
Eminem
Okay.
looking motherfuckers.
Okay, so meanwhile, over in Numenor, everyone who has been faithful to the queen who has been tried by deadly sea monster, they're all declared traitors, which means that Elendil is a traitor, but I thought he already was declared a traitor, so there we go. His daughter, who now is being slightly less of a dick, actually warns him so that he can escape before he's arrested. And then there's, I think, what's meant to be in a very affecting love scene where he thinks he's going to go with the queen to Middle Earth, but she's like, no, I've got to stay with my people. And he's like, whatever makes you think, then everything I've done before that I would have no courage. And I think it's all meant to be very kind of like Casablanca and very meaningful and loving and gorgeous, but I don't know, these scenes don't really work for me. But basically,
Um,
Elendil is given Narsil. It's the first time that Narsil is named, and that's kind of like, ooh, goosebumps. And then he escapes, basically.
how dare you compare it to Casablanca?
I know. I know. That was so listeners may not know that Varley's wedding was inspired by Casablanca and his wedding outfit. I mean, like this is I'm getting into very dangerous territory here. But anyway.
Yeah,
But I think that's what we're
my
meant to
wife
think, like
did
a
let me
form.
cosplay.
Yeah, but I think that's what we're meant to think, isn't it? That it's two people who are honourable and love each other, but because they're honourable, they're not going to be together, that she's going to stay behind for her people and he's going to go and try and save the people in Middle Earth. So, you know,
So, what was the point of the sea monster scene? If
I
everyone's going to be
know.
found guilty,
Exactly. Makes no sense.
I was like, so an eagle randomly shows up at the coronation. You're like, oh, it means Farazan's the guy. But yet this woman can like fucking wrestle a sea monster, but that doesn't change your mind and sort of say that she is the true queen. Like, I mean, unless they're making a comment about how misogyny is across all realms and times and fantasy worlds.
no,
But
I think it's a throw out to Monty Python and random beings giving people magical stuff that's not a system of government.
yeah, exactly. But it was rude that somehow an eagle randomly arriving can signal one thing, but wrestling a sea monster does not. Any other comments on Elendil or anything else going on in the scene?
Well, just
Shot by shot
that
retake of Elrond giving Enduril to Aragon in the movies,
Very
shot for
true.
shot.
which worked for me. I'm gonna say
It did work for me. Yeah. And it worked for me. Like the echo then works like watching Two Towers yesterday evening. And then when that shot for shot happens, oh man, I got the shivers. It's like, no, it was just, a thing of great beauty for me.
Yeah, it works. No, but the whole well, why the sea monster? Why did they just walk out of the whole sea monster trial?
Yeah. Why
Go
wouldn't they just been
free and
arrested
then being
immediately?
like,
Yeah.
no, he's still king and you're still nothing. And I mean, it doesn't. I really don't understand the power dynamics or who decides who is in charge and who are these guys that are around kind of all the time, but that we don't see talking on or having any agency any time in the series. It's just Numenor is really badly written. And I'm gonna go back to what I said, I think in during the first season is that, or maybe at the beginning of this one, but Numenor in itself could have been really interesting to write, and not that hard, and with enough of a blank canvas that you could have done a lot of interesting things, I think. So either you keep it for its own show or you do it a bit more consistently and just better here. But it's such a shame what they've done with it.
I think the Miriel thing was a mistake just to introduce her. I think it should have just been Numenor declines into decay, Pharazôn is a corrupt leader, Elendil is persecuted and has to flee. I think foisting the love story on it was unnecessary and overcomplicated. They didn't have the time to do it justice, and they didn't have the time to do the corruption of Pharazôn justice in the way that they did the corruption of all the kind of the the miss, whatever you want to call it, with Celebrimbor. Like that character arc was given time and was therefore very moving. Pharazôn probably deserved that much time, right, to become a Numenorian who ultimately falls into corruption. And it's just not enough time. It's not well written enough. It all looks, the costumes, and it's so much care and attention on how everything looks, and that's great because it creates this amazing visual echo with what's going to come. But I'm really hoping, and actually not that much time was spent on it. So maybe next season, if there is a new season, it hasn't yet been commissioned. I'm hoping we get more time with Elendil and Isildur and seeing the founding of this great Numenorian kind of regime. I don't know how you call it. Over this.
I thought the third season was all set.
No,
They
it
signed
has
up.
not yet been commissioned. There was an article in the Hollywood Reporter 2 days ago saying Amazon's on the verge of commissioning it, and the writers' room is going, but it hasn't yet been commissioned. And because
Okay.
of a lot of the social media positivity towards the finale, I'm feeling optimistic. But Amazon will have to look long and hard because it's an incredibly expensive show to put on. So
Sure, but Screen Rant has a note that says Rings of Power season 3 is expected to release around 2026.
yeah, but it
I
has
have
not been formally renewed, unless at this. I mean, we're recording on Sunday night, so maybe it has been. But Friday, THR was not saying it had been renewed.
So for Numenor, thinking about what it was is there any real reason to have it condensed into this timeline? It couldn't have been Numenor like 1,000 years ago, and the start of next season be like Eregion's destroyed, Rivendell and Imladris is created. They're kind of everyone's licking their wounds, and now Sauron's become powerful in Mordor, and his army is huge now because it takes that long to get a huge army. You can't just do it overnight. And then introduce this part of the Numenorian story in next season. Like, could they have done like a 5-year gap or what? Like what George was trying to do.
Yeah, maybe. I think they probably felt that they needed to show, like, what's the most famous like anchor protagonist in Lord of the Rings? I would argue it's Aragorn, even though it's really Frodo. And like for most people who are like not lore masters, their echo to the past is like always the heir of Elendil, the heir of Elendil. So I think they probably felt that they had to show who Elendil was from like literally episode 1, season 1.
Yeah, I think they're basing all of this on famous characters that we know from the Lord of the Rings, but haven't either who are past characters or elves that have lived a long time. And I think for some of them there was a mistake because the Numenor story doesn't work
Yeah,
well.
I mean, couldn't have just been like Father Elendil telling Isildur about, about this time with Celebrimbor as a flashback, and then like bring it into the present. Just, I don't understand how they're going to be able to have the downfall of Numenor, because the downfall of Numenor is brought on by Sauron being held captive. So that means we have to have a big battle in the very beginning of next season to bring Sauron to Numenor to corrupt the already corrupted Al-Farazon. Like,
Yeah,
I don't.
I don't think Sauron's going to be going to Numenor. I think we're meant to believe that Numenor has already been corrupted.
Yeah, by the brief
I don't
time.
actually, yeah, I don't think we're going to be going to Numenor next season at all.
Well, I don't know about that, but do you think that just the few days that Sauron spent on Numenor with Galadriel was the beginning of the corruption, even if we didn't know he was Sauron yet?
Yeah,
And
maybe he was also whispering with Farazon. Maybe we'll get a flashback. I don't know. But yeah,
Well,
I
we
think it
could
is
have.
a bit of a narrative bind, isn't it? They're going to have to figure their way out because that's
yeah,
going to be incredibly time wasty and expensive to have that whole thing happen. But maybe they will. I don't know if it's renewed.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know, because it already seems like the corruption is coming from the Palantir and Numenor, but Sauron doesn't have the other Palantir,
Mm.
so who's being, it just doesn't make sense, guys.
I feel that that should be like, yeah, that's your tagline for this episode. It just doesn't make sense. Anything more on Elendil and Miriel before we move to Eregion? Nope. Okay, so I guess the narrative heart of this episode and indeed the season is in Eregion, and it's the confrontation between Celebrimbor, or the partnership between Celebrimbor and Sauron, who still looks like Anatar at this point. Sauron is torturing Celebrimbor, wanting to know the location of the Nine Rings for the men. And Celebrimbor now realizes exactly what he has been complicit in and what he has done. And in his death, in his being sort of slowly tortured, lays some truth on Sauron, telling him that, calling him the Lord of the Rings, but saying also that he will be their prisoner and that he will ultimately be ruined by one who I guess we will interpret to be Frodo coming forth. It's a very moving scene. I think it's very well acted between the two actors, in particular, Charlie Vickers, when told that he will be their prisoner, and sort of like tears roll down. And you're not sure whether it's pride at being called the Lord of the Rings or some acknowledgement that he is now going to be captive to them. It's a very complicated moment. And then before all this sort of comes to an end, the orcs enter the room and ask Anatar if he is Sauron, and he says he has many names. So, thoughts on this very powerful scene between Celebrimbor and Sauron? I wish I could say
Marie, do
Sauron
you want to
like
go?
Galadriel says it.
Sauron.
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 I, I can go. Yeah, I loved it. I don't really have the same interpretation as you do of how Sauron reacts in the
Good.
season. I think they've done a good job portraying Sauron as a kind of toxic partner, or just toxic person who parts of him really believe that he's doing this for Middle Earth, for the people,
To
for
bring peace.
Celebrimbor in a way. So I think he's really good at lying to himself that it was a real partnership. And he is also, so I'm not saying he cries because Celebrimbor dies, but I think part of it is there, like there's some kind of
Love,
sadness,
admiration.
yeah, and love, and just sadness to witness the end of this weird partnership where he was manipulating Celebrimbor, and he was lying to him, and it was vicious and cruel and all of that, and he just tortured him for like hours, but still there's some kind of very misplaced attachment, I think. I think that's something that they've been trying to do with Sauron.
Yeah, I agree. It reminded me a little bit actually of I've been thinking a lot because of some books I've been reading about domestic abuse and how you can have the domestic abuser after he's abused the woman, or if it's a man, or the other way around, whichever way. I don't want to gender it. They then cry because they're like, look what you made me do to you. I love you and
Yeah.
look what you made me do. And I almost felt in that moment where he kills Celebrimbor, it's like, look, I loved you and I respected you and we were this amazing partnership and you taught me things and I taught you things and we created these amazing things and look what you made me do. Like if only you had just told me, if only you'd just been a partner with me and come on this journey with me, I wouldn't have had to torture you and kill you. It's like that kind of weird toxic double think that abusive partner, as you say, partners can have. It's a very, I think it's this is what annoys me because this is so well written and so layered and so open to interpretation in different ways, which is how I love great TV. And you're just like, why couldn't you bring this A game to Numenor? But yeah. Matt, how did you interpret the tears of Sauron?
Okay, so basically everything you just said is correct. I feel like it is very mirroring of an abusive relationship, and that in the context of this scene as it is, well written. I liked it. In the context of what we know of Sauron, it's utter fucking bullshit. And it fucks up Celebrimbor because Sauron does torture him, and Celebrimbor gives up the location of the Nine, gives up the location of the Seven, but does not give up the location of the Three.
Hmm.
So because they already gave the Three away openly and gave the Seven away openly and hiding the Nine, it makes no fucking sense why you hold out to, save these men who he already looks down as pejorative and, being willing to be deceived. Like the only time I could ever see Sauron crying is when he was offered amnesty after the War of Wrath, and then he was so like overwhelmed by just shame that he went back to evil. Like this is not the character. Like he uses people. Like
Mm.
when Sam puts on the ring, he sees like him healing the world and like making gardeners everywhere and making sure that people are tending those gardens as slaves, and that's what the ring does and that's what Sauron does. And maybe in his mind he does think like, I'll heal the world as I see it, as I command it, as I will it, and everyone will be under me and there will be peace and
Yeah.
prosperity or whatever.
Pax
Um,
Sauron, basically, right?
yeah. So, I mean, it's not within his character of what we know about Sauron. And I think that it really took a really interesting part of the lore and fucked it up.
But made it cool. I don't know. I love this storyline. I think both actors did a great job, and I was truly into it, I have to say.
So are we going to be able to see like the condensation of Barad-dûr right underneath the flaming eye next time he sees something he loves die? Like like what about how he's been set up in the movies
I tell you what,
makes you
though,
think
at the
he weeps?
moment, I watched Return of the King. I kind of got to the destruction of the ring about like 4 or 5 hours ago, and the moment where the ring kind of dissolves into the lava, and Sauron's eye just goes straight, like looks down and towards the cracks of Mount Doom, away from the battle. I almost did kind of interpret it as sad. Like he's like, oh no. And I almost felt sad for him. I was like, oh, that's it. It's happened.
He's-
Poor Sauron. I was like, this is the
Oh,
stupidity of
wow.
ours. I know. I know.
Wow.
I know.
I
I
always thought
know.
that was like super cartoonish, like when the cartoon characters used to see a pretty girl or something like that,
And
it
the eye
falls
would
out
pop
like
out.
Arugula.
It was almost like it was Charlie Vickers. It was like literally, I was just like, oh my God, this now has so much more depth. Vickers now. Oh.
Well,
Yeah.
I can
So
I can get behind, sorry, the idea that Sauron is an evolving character from Rings of Power to The Lord of the Rings, and it's not that unplausible for me that he
Yeah.
would still be kind of on the verge of possibly having some good in him
Mm.
1,000 years before Lord of the Rings, or even more.
Yeah.
well, they set him up in the show to be that way because what did he say a couple of episodes ago? you wouldn't believe what a slave to Morgoth I was, and like, you had to do whatever he wanted to do and try to make him some kind of sympathetic character. I think he was just lying, and I think that he would shed tears to Celebrimbor to manipulate him, but not at the very end with no one there watching. Like, it's, yeah.
Charlie Vickers
I
sells
think,
it though.
yeah, and I think sadly I mean, if the premise of your show is that you're gonna have Sauron as an actual character who has dialogue and interactions and all of the things that we don't see in the Lord of the Rings, he has to have a bit more depth than just
Yeah.
full evil, cruel, manipulative, just evil personified. That wouldn't work as well in this show. So I think in this instance, for me, it's not so much of an issue as with a lot of the other inconsistencies.
I completely agree. And to bring it back to that theme of domestic abuse, this is why I was thinking about it. Because I watched that Blake Lively film, It Starts With Us, which had been criticized for romanticizing domestic abuse. And I was thinking to myself that in the limited experience I have, but definitely experience of domestic abuse in my extended family, it does start off a bit like a romance because there's a lot of charm and a lot of love bombing and a lot of begging for forgiveness and offering of redemption and a lot of, the victims don't stay because the guy is 100% all the time cartoon villain evil. They stay because they think there is good in them and redemption and because there has been charm and romance. And I just feel that this show is getting something quite right about manipulative relationships. And I think that's quite brave to do in the context of fantasy and in the context of a character that we only know as a cartoon villain eye, a giant eye. I think they had the narrative scope to do a lot with Sauron, and they've really done it well. A bit like Tom Bombadil, right? Like there was a lot of open space to occupy, and they've occupied it really well. So I appreciate it. Anything more in the stuff? We're over to the Southlands, which I'm sure everyone's very keen to get to.
Let's go.
Let's go. So Theo, that we all care about, he's not the flipping ancestor of Rohan, everyone on the internet, just because his name starts with the same four letters as Theoden. Theo returns home safely. Isildur and Estrid finally share a kiss, for anyone who cares about that. Kemen, who in a series that features Sauron is definitely the most hated man in it on the internet, arrives from Numenor. He basically welches on the deal with the Southlands. He's not going to give them the aid that was promised. He's basically coming as a conqueror. And in an ominous note, is saying that he's going to chop down trees and wood. And we all hope he comes to a sad end involving Ents. There are people out there who are hoping he becomes one of the ring wraiths, and I just think that's kind of like too senior for him. I just don't think he's that important. But the hatred for Kemen is real. And basically, Isildur boards a ship home back to Numenor, which could give us our opening, I suppose, narratively to the fall of Numenor next season, leaving Estrid behind while his dad is crossing the other way, I guess. So, Mary, thoughts on the Southlands?
So first of all, I don't think Elendil is crossing to Middle Earth. He's just going elsewhere on Numenor,
Okay.
where there are still people who would be faithful to the old way and to Miriel.
Okay. So Isildur and Elendil together can fight or can be witness to whatever morality. Okay. Then
I
season
think
three
so,
suddenly
yeah.
becomes so more interesting as long as they write it well. Okay, cool.
Yeah. On the Southlands, I couldn't care less about Isildur and Estrid.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think I could care less about any romance than I did about Elendil and Miriel, but here it is. So yeah, I don't care. I don't care. I hate the guy like Kemen, is that his name?
Yeah, Kemen.
But it's almost an easy hate. Like it's just
Yeah.
he's a well, I did find it hard to watch him hugging Isildur when he's the one who basically murdered his best friend.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I have to say about these scenes.
Yeah. Matt, anything to add, or shall we move swiftly on?
Just foreshadowing more ends next season, I guess.
Hope
The
so.
Timber talk.
I definitely
It's
want Kemen to go down at the hands of Ents.
it's very, very stupid.
I love it. Okay, so back to Galadriel, who is on the run. She's got the 9 rings for the men. Comes up to Adar, and I suppose in a sense that the Sauron Celebrimbor duality is maybe matched by the sort of Galadriel Adar this season. She has her ring, which he took from Elrond at the end of episode 7, and it's healed him. So he looks like his old elven self. But when he gives the ring back, the corruption returns. And he talks about his name being Adar, meaning father, which I thought we already knew. But, anyways, the orcs betray him and stab him to death, just as Adar urged them to do to Sauron. So basically, that's kind of the end of the Adar storyline. I think I felt quite sorry for Adar. I felt that he genuinely did feel that he was doing what was for the best for the orcs against Sauron. And, they have put their faith in Sauron, and I don't think that's going to end well for them either. Any thoughts on this?
What you
Did
get
you?
with trying to make orcs great characters. They're bad. That's it.
But did you care about Adar? Did you feel sympathetic to his story?
No, I think he'll probably be alive next episode. He will have turned into some kind of symbiote like Sauron did, and maybe infest, Boulder or something, and be, another version of a troll or something. I don't know. But I don't understand how he could be dead, but Arondir, who got stabbed to death last episode, is like fine. It just seems like a big waste of time and energy and money and plot that could have been used a number of other places.
Yeah, you could have taken that time and devoted it to Numenor, maybe. But I liked him as a character. I like I wasn't as much as many people like, oh, I don't need all babies. I like the idea that things are a bit more grey. Mary, how about you?
Not much more than maybe the middle ground between the two of you. I was a bit sad when Adar died, but at the same time, he kind of had it coming. I mean, he did attack. So yeah, I understand. I know you have to get to Sauron, and we have to kill him. We'll never be truly free if he's still alive. But he did massacre all of his children against Eregion and the elves. And the fact that Galadriel could have some kind of sympathy for him, because I think that's what the scene wanted to say, that we were kind of watching it through her eyes, and if we feel sympathy, it means that she must too. It's a bit, I mean, but then again, he just massacred all of the elves, so not very it doesn't sit very well with me that these two almost like had some kind of alliance or shared understanding because they're both enemies of Sauron.
Yeah, awkward.
Yeah.
Okay, meanwhile, in Eregion, Elrond and High King Gil-galad are taken captive, but the dwarfs actually do arrive, not Prince Durin, because he's in mourning for his father, and they tip the balance and drive out the orcs. So we have a great elf dwarf sort of alliance that wins, basically. Anything to say on that before we get into the final Galadriel Sauron sort of bit in Eregion?
I would say we finally saw an elf fight like we've seen elves fight, rather than being caught by surprise and not like elegant and prepared. I don't understand how the dwarves got there so quickly or got inside the town so quickly. Just
Yeah, there was
doesn't
some
make
Peter
any sense.
Baelish teleporting going on there, wasn't there? But it was emotionally satisfying when they turned up, for sure, I think.
It was, but yeah, I agree that I think the whole thing with this battle and like the numbers are both and the numbers are both too great and too little. Like we didn't see enough dwarves, and then at the same time, um, all of the elves have been killed, but there's still some elves in Middle-earth afterwards. It's just it doesn't really work. The scales don't really work. Like, is it the whole of the elves? Is it just one kingdom of dwarves coming to their rescue? Are we meant to understand that going forward there will be 150 elves in Middle Earth and that's it? I mean, that whole thing doesn't really make sense for me. As to, I think I did find it satisfying that they indeed came, even when mourning for King Durin,
Yes.
and yeah, that what I said after what I thought, maybe what they said on the Discord, I don't remember if I said it on a podcast, but the fact that they didn't show before kind of annoyed me, because even if you had to go and keep the king from doing whatever, you just then, once during the young has things under control, you can just go back to saving the elves. So I'm happy that they did come in the end. I think it's very it's in character for Durin and his friendship
Yes.
for Elrond. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want that big rupture to happen already, right? I mean, that's a long way in the future. Okay, so then we come, I guess, to another big showdown, which is Galadriel Sauron. There's actually, I think, a very nicely choreographed sort of hand-to-hand combat, or sort of, one-on-one combat scene between them. And there's a lot of reference here linguistically to something that Galadriel's going to say in Fellowship of the Rings when she meets Frodo. And when she says to Frodo, the Dark Lord has often tried to search my mind, but I have kept the door shut to him. And here Sauron says, I know your mind, the door is still open. And Galadriel declares, the door is shut. So there's a very direct call out to language that will be used later on in the films. Sauron sort of changes his appearance to Halbrand herself and Celebrimbor, and basically she becomes incredibly wounded, and he stabs her with his crown, just as that sort of first scene in the first episode of the season had shown that. And I guess that, the crown of Morgoth is one of these sort of sacral items in the Tolkien verse, which is imbued with evil, so that if you're stabbed with it, it's going to start corrupting your physicality. And while she's on the ground, Sauron basically tries to take the 9 rings from her. He tries to bewitch her into handing over her ring, but Galadriel basically tells him that rather than healing the world, he should heal himself. And she jumps backwards over the cliff's edge to escape him. And basically, Sauron has a little hissy fit and stabs an orc. So there we go. A lot of call forwards towards Fellowship of the Ring, and a really nice, I think, bit of maybe conceptual work about, what it is to be in this world and Tolkien's values, which are that sympathy and mercy are very important, but also that it's about healing yourself and about sort of, I don't know, I'm being inarticulate, but how do you guys feel about this big confrontation?
So I re-listened to the War of Wrath and the Calibeth the other day, and it turns out that Morgoth's crown was actually beaten into a collar to have him chained out into the void. So I don't know what crown that is now. As far as the dwarves showing up, just to put a finish point on that, in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, in the midst of battle, the dwarves, the leader, Azagal, fell, and they just kind of like stopped everything, picked him up, took him off the field of battle, singing a death song, and like no one kind of like touched the dwarves. They just like pieced out of the battle. So I think that they do take the deaths of their leaders very seriously. So I don't think that's in character for them. I just think it's the fight with Sauron and Galadriel was silly, and her jumping to some kind of end was unnecessary.
Mm.
For my part, I loved the fight. It was really nicely choreographed. And what did you think of the setting? I think it looked very much like where the confrontation between Frodo and Boromir happened
Yes,
in
yes,
Fellowship.
yes.
Yeah, and just even though the two scenes don't have that much in common, but there's some kind of things like about giving him the rings
Yes.
and like, taking possession of the rings and someone being closed to that, and Galadriel resisting the will of Sauron the same way that Frodo resists Boromir was kind of nice, I thought. and having the setting making that connection for us was kind of clever. So I enjoyed that. I thought she went over the cliff and it was going to be like a big lake under it or something. I didn't expect to find her on the ground. So that didn't make much sense. But I guess she's Galadriel. She's one of the high elves. I'm
She
at
has a
this stage.
convenient healing ring as well, we've discovered. So.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
honestly, I thought she was going to hop onto an eagle, but an
that would have
eagle
worked.
chose Farazan, but didn't help her out. So.
Yeah. No, but on the fight itself, and it was pretty well done. And I really enjoyed these last for the season at least interactions between Sauron slash Halbrand and Galadriel. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I guess some people will find it too on the nose, but I think the call outs to the text are really, really good.
I think they're
Um,
clever. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this is Galadriel's precise phrasing. I just found it in Fellowship. I say to you, Frodo, that even as I speak to you, I perceive the Dark Lord and know his mind, or all of his mind that concerns the elves. And he gropes ever to see me and my thought, but the door is still closed. Like, to me, that is just beautiful the way that's set up in this episode. I really appreciate that. So yeah, and yeah, the
So,
fight choreography is epic.
so how did the nine get their rings?
Well, we'll find out.
What mental gymnastics has to go on? Celebrimbor, went on and didn't give it up after being tortured by Sauron. Galadriel took a nosedive off a cliff to save them. They already exist at the last alliance of elves and men. So are they going to fall out of his pocket into a river or something and
No, I
Smeagol?
think she's going at some point. They will be given to the men. I think they will be given because, I mean, we'll get there, but obviously at some point Elrond decides to use his ring. They've clearly decided that the rings can be used. And I think they will be given to men in an alliance. I think that's how the rings will get to men. But we'll find out if season
Wait,
3 or 4 ever happen.
doesn't Sauron get the rings, the nines at this point? He has it. He has them at the end of
Oh, of
the.
course, yeah. Ignore
Right.
all
Yeah.
that. I'm talking shit. Yeah,
So yeah.
Sauron takes the 9 from her.
So
Oh,
I
did
think.
he?
The ring she
Yeah. He
saves by
does.
jumping
He does.
the ring she saves by jumping backward off the
Is
cliff
her
is
own.
her ring. He's
Yeah.
got the many
Gotcha.
rings.
Oh, I
Yeah.
misunderstood. Okay.
Yeah. That's me
Yeah.
being
Just
silly.
erase
Thank
that
goodness
last
Mary's
part.
here to keep us honest. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think just in season 3, he just will distribute
Fine.
them to
Yeah.
men
Find
he
some
wants
men
to
and corrupt
control.
them. Yeah, yeah.
Do you want
Okay.
a ring? Yeah. Good. Let's go.
Let's go. Excellent. Jewelry, always good.
Clementino, here's a ring.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
and then we kind of jump back into the story of the stranger. We finally learn his name when the stores call him Grand Elf, and I have to say, I just absolutely adored
Oh,
that. And he has his staff too. He realizes that it's about friendship, not power, and that he has a story to tell. And there's a lovely little speech by Nori. I haven't had much time for the sort of the whole Nori kind of story, but I think there is something lovely about her saying, it's time for us to leave, and I have to find my path too. That they were kind of bonded through not really knowing what they were doing and where they were going and what they wanted, and now they both go on their ways. And I thought that was really touching. Grand Elf. That to me was like one of those moments, like when you first heard Narsil or first heard Lord of the Rings in this episode. I was like, yes. It made my little heart glad. Thoughts, my friends?
blah.
It's so dumb. It's so stupid. Sorry.
So they basically Hodored him, huh?
Yeah, they hodored him. Mary, thoughts, feelings?
I didn't like the whole. Well, I guess it's when he gets back to Tom Bombadil afterwards, but I'm gonna say it anyway now. The staff finds it's wizard, not the other
Mm.
way around. I was like, no, I mean, like references to Lord of the Rings are okay. No, but that's too much. So, yeah, it was cute. It was a bit heavy and on the nose, the whole Gandalf, Gandalf. Oh wait, that sounds like Gandalf.
I'm a
Yeah.
simple, I'm a poor simple innocent. I like stuff like that. I like it on the nose, especially when
Well,
I
that's
waited
good.
2 seasons for a confirmation. I'm like, yes, this is the
It's
confirmation I
something
need.
that we already knew. Like I don't think there are many people watching this series that didn't think
It was Gandalf.
the
Yeah.
stranger was Gandalf at this point.
Imagine if it had turned out to be Saruman. That would have been flipping hilarious. People have lost their shit.
Would have been
Um,
funny.
do you guys give a shit about the stores, about the proto hobbits? Are you keen to see them go on their first sort of like
Why?
mission and maybe end up in Hobbiton or found Hobbiton?
Why? Why in the world would they keep going with the storyline?
Because at some point, I think they'll think the fans want to see the Shire being founded. That's why I want
But
to see the
it's
Shire being founded. I'm that simple fool. I want all of it. I want all of the on the nose stuff. It's so stupid.
so it really is. God damn it! What the fuck?
Okay, so I take
We've
it that
lost Varley.
there's no love for Nori here. Let's move swiftly on. Okay, it's Khazad Dûm. You think it's all good. The Balrog's been walled up. The king's dead. Mourning the king. But Prince Durin has got shit to deal with because a lot of the other dwarven lords, including his own brother, goddammit, are making moves to the crown because fundamentally the dwarves have been corrupted by getting the rings. So all is not well in Khazad Dûm. Thoughts, feelings as we leave the dwarves this season?
It all moves too quickly.
Mm.
I mean, going from the dwarves, I can't even remember the number of things that they have gone through this season. At the same time, it seems like nothing happened really. But I mean, yeah, the Balrog is here, and the whole thing was Durin. But first, the mountain is closing it on them, and just rejecting them in a way. Then they get the rings. Then they can see what they need to do. Then it saves them in a way, but also corrupts them. And now a political thing with kind of a war and succession. I mean, why not? But it just, I'm not quite convinced yet. We'll have to see what they do with it next season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, you can judge these things when you see the full arc for sure. But I think, yeah, I'm glad they came back to it because you couldn't have just had the cold open. I think you have to see a little bit of like the consequences. So setting up for season 3 shenanigans. Okay, and then we go back to the elves. We've got Galadriel. This is a moment of true, I think, friendship and love, right? Because Elrond has the whole kind of arc, or their sort of antagonistic arc this season has been whether you should or shouldn't use the rings, and Elrond has been very dead against it, but he does put it on because he knows it's going to help to heal, or might help to heal her, which it does. And then you get this amazing tableau at the end, which we presume is going to be the place where Rivendell is, where you have Gil-galad, Galadriel, Elrond, and I agree, Matt, like Arondir, basically standing swords aloft, and Galadriel makes this wonderful speech about, the light still shines, that the way to defeat Sauron is to believe in goodness and to believe in the light. And that was a beautiful, I felt, tableau that very much gave me the shivers and the love and the lore gorgeousness that I wanted. So, Mary, let's start with you. How did you feel about the resolution in Proto? Is it Proto Rivendell?
I think so too. That was my thought too, at least. Even though they don't say it, nothing says Rivendell, but I did think it kind of would be a nice place. I kind of think, yeah, I'm with you on all of this. I liked that Elrond, out of friendship and love for Galadriel, put the ring on and helped save her. We can argue about the fact that she should have been dead already, and the rings are very powerful, but are they that kind of very pragmatic, powerful? I'm not sure. But in any case, I loved it, and it worked for me, the end of that arc, except for the fact that it seems like there's only a very small number of elves, and it's a bit, not very well done in that regard. But the whole speech and Proto Rivendell, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
all for it.
And in a way that you get something quite nice in the Nori speech where she talks about, there's a voiceover where she says, some things are just broken and then you have to start building again. And that applies to Eregion, but it also applies to, we get that moody shot of Sauron clutching Feanor's sort of crafting hammer, I guess. So yeah, it just felt like, I hate to bring up House of the Dragons rants, but it just felt like for whatever its flaws, this all ended nicely bringing the threads together, but also setting up all the pieces for season 3. Okay, Sauron's now got his hammer. He's going to make the One Ring. That's his season 3 arc. Okay, the season 3 arc of the elves, they're going to found Rivendell and marshal an alliance against him. Okay, we've got Khazad-dûm. There's going to be political shenanigans there. Okay, we're going to have Isildur reunited with Elendil, and they're going to have to, somehow back Muriel and try and stop the corruption in Numenor. Like it just felt like it was very narratively tied together, which I appreciated.
Yeah, so if you just Google Rivendell by J.R.R. Tolkien, it's basically that valley that they look over is the shot for shot.
So it is Rivendell, basically.
Yeah, I think so.
And you said, what's the point of the burning of the book scene? And I think the burning of the book scene is there to show you. In a way, I think Elrond's a little bit like Faramir. Like, he's a guy who can fight, but he's not really a fighter. He's a bookworm. He's us. And he loves his books and he loves his libraries and he loves his lore. And it shows you what is going to be Rivendell that he then creates. It's going to be a thing that tries to bring that and conserve that. And it's the Elrond and Rivendell that we're going to see in Lord of the Rings, still with his dusty books and his lore.
Yeah, and to go back to that book burning thing, or yeah, they're not exactly books, but yeah,
knowledge burning.
Yeah, I think for all of us readers who've spent so many hours reading books and being very nerdy about it, there's something really tragic about the loss of knowledge and written material. And so I think the point of that scene was just that, to have us feel even more strongly and deeply the loss of Eregion and all of it had.
Yeah. It was interesting to me, watching Return of the Kings, and I think, Gandalf's been in this story from this period.
Fight Minas Tirith and
Okay, so
driving
they are
out all the evil
fighting. It's
creatures
just
from Mirkwood.
off screen. Okay. Cool.
Elrond sends his 2 sons to fight because he knows he has to maintain the last haven if the battle goes sideways.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
That
my
makes sense
interpretation of it also is that it's the end for the elves anyway, and it's kind of now the age of men begins. So
they have to fight their own battles and save their own world.
I wouldn't say that that's what Galadriel or Elrond is saying, but there's also the idea that just not that many elves are left to fight.
I also thought, but actually that's now overturned by what Matt just said, that maybe for Galadriel, because she's got this very close relationship to Sauron, that she feels to keep the door shut, it's safer for her to be kept in her sort of elven safe haven, that she can't be in open ground. She doesn't want to risk it. Like, it takes every ounce of her being just to keep that door shut.
We'll have to see, because we all remember the I was there Gandalf scene where Elrond recounts the battle at the end of this age that we're in Rings of Power, where Sauron loses and the ring goes to Isildur and all of that. We remember that scene, so I think probably
Elrond
the show.
Yeah,
Elrond was there, but we didn't see Galadriel. Not in that specific shot, so it doesn't mean that she's not there. But
that's
we'll
true.
have to see in Rings of Power, because I think that's where Rings of Power has to go, right?
That's the ultimate final scene of Rings of Power, right? That's the
yeah.
logical conclusion of Rings of Power.
So
I really
we'll
hope
see.
it gets renewed. I know it gets so much shit, and I know you think it's mostly stupid, Matt, but I'm having such a lovely time derping around this world. I really want it to be able to complete its arc on its own terms. If it gets cancelled, I'm going to be so upset.
Yeah, if it does get canceled, for as much as I hate and can shit on it, it has a chance to redeem itself. So it should be given that chance. But
it already did, didn't it? In relative to season 1, it already did partly, and I think it's getting stronger. And I think the world of modern TV is so brutal that shows often don't get the chance to sort of grow into themselves. And I feel this is maybe one that could.
I
So
agree.
I
Well,
really
if I remember, I think Bezos is like a big Tolkien fan,
is
so
he?
he might just do it as a passion project. I mean, fuck it.
I mean,
Like,
million
what is $1
dollars
billion
passion
to him?
projects. Yeah.
Yeah, but why not, right? I mean, if I had mega billions, that's what I would do. I would like buy first edition books, build a big library, sit in it and read, eat donuts, and then just fund people to make like cool fantasy stuff. And
I love it.
I would also say that like when the shows are done, I want like all the swords and stuff. Like I want like the props and I want all the jewelry. Like some of
Oh
like
my
the
God.
Arwen jewelry. Yeah, but basically I would just like walk around all day, overweight from the donuts and not really doing much exercise, but wearing a lot of like very cool Elvis jewelry.
I know when Greg sent us that auction link for all
Yeah.
the props for Game of Thrones, I was like, oh, 8 helmets and 8 shields, huh? Where can I put those?
Sure, I need that.
I was hoping there would be more of the jewelry from Game of Thrones because I might have bid on some of that. But no, sadly, it was mostly helmets, shields, and maps and like, outfits that Sansa Stark wore that are not going to fit me. And neither would I have use for them in ordinary life. But yeah.
Okay, guys. On that note, and that image of Bina in her massive library, reading books and eating donuts.
It's a happy image to end on, isn't it, Mary? Let's be honest.
It is. I'm gonna go.
Yeah,
But it
we'll
was
wrap it
it
up.
was lovely to have that chat.
And thank you for coming back on. I only hope it's renewed so that you're on more Vox as well, because this is when we
My
seem to find
pleasure.
you. All right, thank you both for joining, and thank you, listeners, for listening. And fingers crossed we speak again in season 3. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bina. Thanks, Marie.
Thanks, Bina. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
I watched the whole extended edition of Lord of the Rings yesterday and today.
Oh,
So it was a good weekend.
That's how juiced this got me on
I
Tolkien.
get
I'm
that.
going to start a reread of Lord of the Rings. Although I've never read all the kind of like the lore stuff, so maybe I should go back and read all that.
The Silmarillion is really dense, the first few chapters, because it's like the cosmology. But after that, it gets to be like a little more narrative kind of prose. But yeah.
So is all the stuff
Being-
that's in this series from the Silmarillion? Is that my one-stop shop for reading the actual text?
It's supposedly not quite. It should be more the appendix.
Right.
Appendices, I guess, pro. But because they don't technically have the rights to the Silmarillion, but you can find
Oh,
pieces
Yeah. So
of that.
and now I've been reading online that like the Tolkien professors like it's fine whatever Rings of Power wants to do with the lore, it's fine because Tolkien never set down canon because the Silmarillion was put together by Christopher, and it's like, well, come on.
it
Like,
was more. Wasn't
eventually,
his argument more that Tolkien wanted, like all good myth, he wanted it to grow in the telling and evolve over time, and for people to add to it. So he would have been opposed to like. There is no such thing as a canon when it comes to things like folk fairy tales and epic tales that grow in myth. I think was more the
yeah.
argument.
But eventually, we're all like, oh, this is the translation of Beowulf. Like that's it, right?
Mm,
Like we at some point we all agree that this is what it is, and that's what Christopher Tolkien published as the Silmarillion.
mm.
That
So
those were the final
basically,
things.
so I've got to read what the appendices to Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion is what will cover me for this series, basically.
I think
It
that's a good
will
start.
bookend the series.
Okay, cool. I will do that.
I've only read the Silmarillion as the apart from the Lord of the Rings books, of course, but I've not read any other lore books or Tolkien verse. So I think it's already a good start to feel like you're more into the whole universe and not just the story that you can read in the Lord of the Rings, which is already big in itself. But yeah.
I have to say that watching Lord of the Rings, having just watched Rings of Power, it is richer and deeper. And like one of my favorite scenes, there's so many favorite scenes. One of my favorite scenes is the coronation when Aragorn turns to everyone and starts singing. And then when you realize what he's singing and you think, oh my goodness, next season, Elendil, when he ships up on Middle Earth, could actually say that phrase that Aragorn then repeats. I mean, it just like everything has so much more resonance. So I'm enjoying
Yeah,
it.
what really made it for the like made me forgive any of the movie's sins, and even on the first watch, was the attention and detail in the decor. I felt like the entire sets like told extra stories that weren't being conveyed like directly through dialogue or implicit like direction, but like you
Numenorean
could see.
architecture and
Exactly, and you could see like Earl the Young and like Mediceld and like in the tapestries in the background. It was just wild, and I really appreciated that
yeah,
because
but I
there
think
is
that's
this like rich history.
yeah, I think there's some of that in Rings of Power too, or maybe Rings of Power feels better by having now watched Lord of the Rings and feeling the echoes. I don't know, as someone who's read Lord of the Rings so many times but never managed to get through the Silmarillion, I feel that I don't know what I feel. I have feelings though.
Oh, good.
Right.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a
Dina's not
psychopath.
dead
I suppose
inside.
that's good. Having spent like way too many hours with my husband debating whether Joker is a psychopath or not after Folly of Earth. And then it's so weird actually watching the Gollum Schmeagol scenes after watching Joker Folly of Earth. And you can get this whole debate about borderline personality disorder. But anyway, let's get into the episode.